Welcome everyone and welcome to this week's F3 track guide in the fixed setup as we are doing for this season. We are at Laguna Seca this week, a track that I think everyone has raced one time or another on their iRacing career, and it's a track that always seems to pop up on the F3 calendar. I don't remember a season where I haven't raced it, and it always throws up for some interesting racing in this car because it's very quick. Obviously the high downforce does suit the car, or the car does suit this track, shall we say, but there's no room for error around here. There's gravel everywhere, there's no runoff areas, and of course we've got some pesky sausage curves which we hate in this car, and the world famous corkscrew, which is treacherous enough in any car, let alone in a quick Formula 3 car. So yeah, it's one that you need to be careful of, and as always outright speed is good, but consistency is key here, guys. I have had races where I've started from the back of the grid, I've not carried out one on-track overtake, and I finished on the podium. So yeah, it's it's taken me a while to get a lap together for you guys as well, and you'll see that this was proper on the limit. Will I be able to do this time in a race? I don't know. I probably won't because I won't want to risk it. This was on the edge, but as always, we'll analyse the lap, show where I could have made up time because there are some areas that I could have done, and of course where to be careful of as well. But yeah, lap time I set was a 1:14.6. The fixed setup this week feels good. It could do with a bit more front end, so I do expect the open setups to be quite a bit quicker around here. You can just, there's a couple of corners here that you're just a bit hesitant on the throttle, and where if I had more front end or front downforce, where the front of the car would turn in more, I could get on that power earlier, but it still will make for some interesting racing and some good racing hopefully. But yeah, track temperature was 23 degrees. Brake bias, I brought it back down from 55.5 as I always do, but further than normal, down to 52.8 because, believe it or not, this track requires quite a bit of trail braking, and there's only really one hard braking point, and that is in the last corner. Even the Andretti hairpin, which is technically the first corner, you do require a bit of trail braking, and you don't want to stamp your foot on the brake because we don't want obviously to lock those wheels up. So yeah, lo and behold, guys, I'm going to stop talking. We're going to have the lap from cockpit view, then a far chase camera angle, and then we're going to analyse that lap and see how we did it. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and let's get into it. So guys, let's see how we did it. So we are on the start to finish straight, or more like bend, covering as little track as possible there, making sure we don't hit the bollards because you will get damage otherwise, and allow the car to move over to the right hand side as we pause it here. And we have pretty much 2 wheels on the track, 2 wheels off the track. That's fine, you won't get an off track for that unless you're all the way over. And we're keeping an eye out for the 3 marker in particular. Now, just want to make note of the white line here, because as I always repeat myself, this car does not react the same as it does in the first few laps of a race. Cold tyres, full tank of fuel. I'm going to get that printed on a t-shirt one day. But the car doesn't react the same. So you need to bring your braking markers back a touch as per what we do in this lap right now. Because of course, we've burnt off a bit of fuel here. We've got nice warm tyres. The track is nice and grippy from all the laps I've been doing. We need to take that into consideration. So this white line, or braking just before this white line, is pretty much where you want to be braking at the start of a race, because it's essential that you don't lock up into this corner. We want to carry as much speed as possible, allow the car to roll through the corner and not lock up. It's very easy to, which is why we moved the brake bias back slightly, more so than we normally would, because this track, as we stated in the intro, requires quite a bit of trail braking, and if we have the brakes too far forward, we're just going to lock up the tyres and lose a lot of time. So back to the corner itself and the entry, and as you can see, the 3 marker has just gone out of view there. You can see my throttle inputs, and that's when we start to brake. Bringing the car into the apex. So as you see, we've opened it up and we're going to aim the car to get into this apex, kind of diagonally into the red and white, the red sausage curb there, and the blue and white curb, which is the apex. And what you'll notice as well that's essential to take into account here is shifting down from 3rd to 2nd gear. Now we're going to take this into 2nd gear, but we're not going to shift down instantly into 2nd gear. Obviously the first few shift changes or downshifts are quite quick, but then 3rd to 2nd is quite delayed because we're very high in the revs at this point. If we shift down into 2nd, we're going to be too high in the revs and the car is going to be very unsettled, more than likely going to lose the rear of the car because we're carrying quite a bit of speed here, and we of course don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait. We're going to just keep braking, and then just before we get into the apex, as you can see there, we're going to get into 2nd gear. So there's a bit of a delay changing from 3rd to 2nd than the previous downshifts. And as we said, all the while we are trail braking here, keeping it as tight to this sausage curb as possible without going over it. And then we're just going to allow the car to drift out. Not too far, we still want to keep it tight, but we don't want to allow the car to drift out too far, because otherwise we're going to cover more track and then we have to use more brake, and then we're not going to be able to get on the throttle, etc. And it's all like a chain reaction. We just lose too much time. But likewise, we don't want to be too tight to the corner, because otherwise we're not going to be able to get on the throttle early and we're going to have to adjust ourselves. So just managing the corner here, still trail braking round, and then as you can see, as we get halfway round the corner and as the next apex really comes into view, I'm getting on the throttle, and you can see I'm not on full throttle yet because I don't want to be on full throttle because of my steering input. I'm pretty much at 90 degrees and the rear will just go on me and I'll spin. So you'll see a lot of people do that. You'll see a lot of people run too far wide, and you'll also see a lot of people lock up. And as I said, it's so essential that you don't do that, guys, and that you practice this corner a lot, because while every corner requires your attention around this track because there's no room for error, it's not a very forgiving track at all. This corner, this hairpin, is where the majority of overtakes are going to be done. So it's essential that you are able to consistently brake, especially when overtaking as well, or even defending. Consistently know your marker of where to brake without locking up. So you want to know the threshold of, okay, that's too far for me to brake because I'll lock up tyres. That's my limit. Because then you're able to defend, you're able to overtake, and it's, for me, the most important corner on the racetrack. So obviously we've got the world famous corkscrew, but this is the most important one, even more so than the corkscrew, because of where all the overtakes are going to be done. So as you can see, we're on full throttle there. Now, if I'm being super critical of myself, I probably could have been on the throttle or full throttle earlier. I have done that before, so something to play around with, guys, getting on full throttle a little bit earlier. But I was happy with that. I still set a decent time as well. But you can see, just allowing the car to drift out to the right, used a little bit of runoff curve that we've got, and then we're quickly moving it over to the left-hand side. Now, what we keep an eye out for is the 2 marker, and we're going to be braking just after it, as you can see. Now, this corner, there's 2 different ways to take it. Of course, we're going to discuss the quick way, and then we're going to discuss probably the safer way. Don't worry, it's not difficult. It's just 2 simple gears. So we're holding it through this corner in 4th gear, and turning in just before we get to the 1. We don't want to turn in on the 1, because if you do, you're just going to run too far wide. As you can see, trail braking rounds. And then keeping it as close to this red sausage curb as possible without actually hitting it, because if you do, you will shoot. Well, it will unsettle the car, and you will more likely spin and end up in those barriers. Speaking from experience there, guys. So full throttle before we get to the red and white curb, and then just allow the car, red sausage curb, then allow the car to drift out to the left-hand side. Now, if you struggle to get the front end of this car turning in and timing this corner, because I personally have had a lot of issues with this corner and trying to get it right, it's personally quite difficult. That's for me. Others may find it really easy. But while 4th gear is the quickest, it might not be the safest. As I said, this fixed setup, I feel like the front end struggles to turn in some areas, this being one of them. But obviously we need to make the most of trail braking to try and control, obviously, the shift movement of the car around the corner. But you can shift down into 3rd gear here, guys. So just before, around about here, or just before the corner, you can shift into 3rd. It just allows you to get the front end to turn in and get round the corner. I would highly recommend that at the start of the race. I personally do that because the car just doesn't want to, even in an open setup, it doesn't want to turn in at the start of a race with cold tyres and a full tank of fuel. So this definitely is a 3rd gear corner at the start of a race. You can take it in 4th, but at your own risk. You'll be going very slowly, and yeah, to get the car turning in. And as I said, you don't want to run wide here, guys, because there's just gravel everywhere, no room for error. So yeah, as we said, consistency is key around here more than outright speed. Of course, speed always helps, but it's no good if you're fast and you can't keep it on track. So we used a little bit of runoff back there that we had, or the little of it, and now we're coming up to a very fast right-hander. And what we keep an eye out for is the 2 marker, because that is when we want to turn in. Just as we go past the 2 marker, we're turning in. As before, we want to be turning in before the 1 marker as well, like fully. We don't want to have our wheels still kind of on the 1 marker as we go past. And then what we do is here, guys, we're trying to keep it as close to this sausage curb as possible, as we did on the previous 2 corners. And we want to have a slight lift of the throttle. Now, you don't want to touch the brakes here at all, guys, pretty much throughout the whole race. That's even at the start. It would just be a full lift rather than just say a half lift of the throttle at the start. But this is a corner that is essential here to get right, because this is one of the few other places that you could maybe pull off an overtake. Because this sausage curb, you'll see a lot of people hit it like the previous corner, just completely misjudge the turning point, and they'll hit it full on. They'll either save it but lose a lot of speed, which leaves them vulnerable down this short straight, and then either they'll lose control of the car entirely, end up in the wall, or I've seen some cases where they just kind of tank slapper and then end up in this wall on the right hand side. So yeah, definitely a corner that is important to get right, guys, and try and nail the exit. But as you can see, just as we get past it, as we hit the curb, we get full on the throttle, allowing the car to drift out to the left, opening up the steering, and then bringing it over to the right hand side to cover as little track as possible, and to open up the swooping left hander up the hill towards the kink and corkscrew. Now, as we play it on, what we keep an eye out for is this white line in between the 2 and 3 marker. This is your braking point. As you can see, as we get bang on it, we're on the brakes, and then shifting down into 4th, turning in just before the 1 marker again. Trail braking round here, guys. Trail braking is important here, and then we're going to keep it as tight round here as possible, so much so that these left wheels will end up on the gravel. You can see we're trail braking, and then just before we get to the sausage curb, that's when we're on the throttle, because we want to be powering out of the corner. As you can see, we're really inch perfect there. So close to that sausage curb. Wheels are slightly on the gravel. There is grip there, believe it or not. And then we're just opening up the steering, allowing the car to drift out to the right hand side. Just staying off this curb, because this curb here is nasty. You'll see after as well, just up here in the kink. There's a couple of these rumble strip curbs that if you go on them, they're like glue. They're like magnets. You can't get off them until you come to the end of the curb. It's not like you go on them and then can come straight back on. It's slow. It bottoms out the car, and it really does slow you down, which is evident in the next corner. But I'm just going to play that back, guys, as well, because at the start of a race, and likewise, if you don't feel comfortable getting round here in 4th gear, just shift down into 3rd. At the start of a race, as I say, cold tyres, full tank of fuel. This is a 3rd gear corner. This setup doesn't want to turn in at the best of times, as I said. It's not bad, but could do with more front end. When it's got cold tyres, full tank of fuel, you definitely need to be in 3rd gear around this corner, just to make sure you get the acceleration up the hill. Otherwise, you'll be a bit of a sitting duck. Unless you've got a slipstream from a car in front, then maybe you can keep it in 4th. But yeah, something to be aware of, guys. 4th gear is definitely quicker here, but as I keep saying, consistency is key. We want to keep it on the black stuff, keep it on the track, because if you do that throughout a whole race around here at Laguna Seca, 90% of the time you're gonna have a positive iRating and some decent finishes. So it's just one of those tracks. But yeah, we are gonna click play, and we're gonna allow it to run up the hill now into the kink, keeping it over to the right hand side. Now this kink is, to me, while kind of innocuous and not really a corner that is spoken about a lot at Laguna Seca, that's held for the Andretti hairpin and the corkscrew for good reason. This to me, I think, is probably the most important corner to get right, because sorry, not the most important, the most difficult. That's right, the first corner is the most important for the overtaking, but this is the most difficult because it's a very fast left-hander. As I said, it's just a little kink really in the track, but it's blind, and there's a pesky sausage curb here that absolutely chews you up and sends you flying. You'll see people launch off this thing all week, and I bet at some point or another I will as well, because it's so difficult, because we want to carry as much speed as possible, but it's so easy to get it wrong. But let's have a look how we did it here, and I could have improved in this corner as well, which I'll show you. But what we keep an eye out for is the 2 marker. Now we're all the way over to the right hand side. We don't want to be too far over. You don't want your antenna to be, or the middle of the car to be over to the blue curb, because it, like before, it kind of sucks it up. And then as we get to the 2, that is your turning point. That's also when you're going to lift. Going to lift entirely. Now, what I do through this corner is I actually keep a little bit of throttle, which I shouldn't have done it, because I carry just a touch too much speed through this corner, and I run a little bit wide, or wider than I'd like, and I hit this curb, or these curbs that run up the hill on the outside of the track here, and they suck you in, and you actually lose time from the car bottoming out. So I would have been better off lifting, carrying a little bit less speed through this kink, and then having a smoother run up the hill. I probably would have, believe it or not, it makes quite a bit of a substantial difference not touching that curb. But as you can see, as we turn in, we still can't see the apex, so that's why it's such a difficult corner. So we really need to, as this whole track does, requires a lot of practice, but this corner more than most. Turn in, and as we want to on the previous ones, we want to keep it as tight to this sausage curb as possible without hitting it. And as you can see, it's so easy to misjudge it. We want to get on the throttle before we hit the curb. And as you can see, I couldn't be any tighter to that without actually hitting it. If I was any further over to the left, we would have been sent flying. But because I'd carried just a bit too much speed through the corner, you can see there, my middle of my car is straight over this curb now, and I can't get back off that until I pretty much run further up it. As you can see, I've got the steering turning left, but it just won't move left, and I lose time, and that compromises your run all the way up the hill here. Now that corner, that kink, anyone who tries an overtake through there, you're just asking for trouble. Unless you've got a severe, unless you're really alongside them on the inside, or like ahead of them, then you can make an overtake, but there's no way you're going to hold it on the outside here, guys. Just let them through. There's a good possibility they may kill themselves in the corkscrew anyway, but it's not worth it going through here side by side, because it always ends up, more often than not, in tears. So just yeah, be careful there, guys. But as we run up the hill now to the famous corkscrew, we want to move the car over to the left hand side, covering as little track as possible, and then we want to pause it just here, or rewind it back just a touch, because the corkscrew, of course, everyone knows it, it's very difficult. Lots of people bin it here in any car in any series, F3 more so than others because of the high torque that we have in this car. It's so easy to lock up the wheels and to also get on the throttle too early. But personally, what I'm keeping an eye out for, guys, here is this white line just before the 3 marker. That's my braking point. Now you can actually see that I get on the brakes a little bit earlier than that, but I am visually looking for this white line in my eye line, moving the car over to the right hand side, because of course the entry to the corkscrew is a left hander, covering that blue and white curb a little bit. We don't want to stay all the way over to the right hand side because you actually do lose time. There is a point of you do want to kind of angle it into the middle of the track to then turn in. That's more than enough of opening up the corner. But this is a second gear corner. Trail braking through, as you can see. And then what you want to do is you can, to get as much time as possible, you can cut this slightly. As you can see, I kind of get my two wheels into this little dip that is in the curb, inside the curb here. And it's only once you go through that you can get on the throttle, guys. You don't want to get, and as you can see, I'm not on full throttle yet. I'm allowing the car to settle, get straight. That's the most important thing, guys, is get the car straight before you get on the throttle. I see the people that spin it get on the throttle here. That's when they get on the throttle, because they've got 90-degree steering lock and they're getting on the throttle and then turning the car right straight away, and it just ends in tears, and normally a big massive pile up. But it also comes back to this braking here, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to lock up. It's so easy to do it, and I totally understand why. I've done it plenty of times. I've done it plenty of times trying to get this lap together for you guys. But the key here is to brake early enough that we don't lock up the tyres and we roll, because the left front is the one that you'll see that locks up. And you can see through here, I'm pretty sure I don't lock up the tyre. As we roll it through, ever so slightly. Okay, ever so slightly I lock it up. That's the smallest lock up I've ever had. It's very difficult to not get any kind of lock up through there, in all honesty. But you can see that was very, very minimal, and it didn't affect my turning. That's when you'll see crashes as well, is people brake too late and it just affects their turning. But it's definitely a second gear corner. Don't shift down into first. If you shift down into first, it might be good for the turning of the corkscrew, but it will not be good for the exit. If you do shift down into first, I would highly advise short shifting into second gear instantly, so that you're in low revs and you can exit the corkscrew safely. So yeah, once you go through that a few times, it's nice and easy. In fairness, it's not that much of a difficult corner. It's just because early on in races there's quite a few pile-ups. Getting through there safe is much better than being quick and then being on the edge and binning it. So, but yeah, as we get through the corkscrew, we're very quickly going to move the car over to the middle right-hand side of the track, because we've got a very fast left-hander. We want to be bringing it round to the left quite quickly. So you don't want to hang this car. It's very easy to hang the car out right here, because you think you're opening up the corner, but actually you're going to lose time, because we're traveling at quite high speed here, 177 kilometers an hour and rising, and we're trusting the downforce of the car. As you can see, turning in, aiming for the red sausage curb and keeping it as tight to it as possible. As you can see, start of the race, when you've got cold tyres and full tank of fuel, that is a big lift through there. Fourth gear, but a big lift, guys. So yeah, just be wary, because the car doesn't want to turn in at all. So yeah, big lift. As you can see here, you will hit the revs at some point where you need to shift up into fifth. So please do that. Be careful, as I said, start of the race or going too wide here. This curb gobbles you up, as the previous ones do, and you can't get off it until later, which will compromise you getting over to the left-hand side to open up the right-hander, which we are doing. We're moving over to the left-hand side, and what we're keeping an eye out for is the 2 marker. Now, we're going to dab the brakes, and we're going to turn in just before is a bit more forgiving than the others. You can go over it. Still recommend that you don't. I would much prefer if I didn't here, because it kind of just, it still unsettles the car a bit, and you still have that slight hesitancy of getting on the throttle. But you can see here, as we get to that curb, we're getting on the throttle. As you can see, we're trail braking through there. And then quickly straighten up the steering and power out of the corner. Now, this last corner as well, guys, make use of this AstroTurf. I think it was last season, iRacing finally stopped this from being an off track. It used to be that even if you got like 2 wheels on it, as we did here, it would be an off track, because technically we're outside of the white line here, but in real life all of this is used. It's the one bit of runoff that we can actually use in iRacing, in Laguna Seca. And yeah, iRacing used to be very hard on us and make that an off track, whereas now we can use it all freely. And as you can see, just using all of that runoff, powering out of the corner, back onto the racetrack, and then up to the start finish line. And there we go, guys. That is a lap around Laguna Seca. A very tricky place here this week. As I said, speed is all well and good here, but it is going to be all about keeping it on the tarmac, guys. It is such a treacherous track. There's no room for error. And I've raced around here enough times in this car and in this series to know that you could quite easily not see anyone on the track and not make an on-track overtake and still finish on the podium spots from the back of the grid. It is just one of those tracks. So yeah, something to be aware of, guys. Consistency is key here more than any other track. Of course, speed always helps, but yeah, make sure you learn how not to lock up your tyres, find that threshold, be safe around the kink and the corkscrew. Yeah, and you should have a good week. So yeah, hope that helped, guys. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and see you out on track. Bye.